an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Unsouled Chapters 12, 13, 14, and 15. In these chapters, Lyndon finds a spot in one of the prestigious 4 schools. Thing is, in order to succeed at one of these schools, you need ability, and he doesn't really have it, so he's not in the best position. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. First of all, thank you very much to Andrew for commissioning this episode. These chapters, I would argue, are some of the most, informative about Lyndon's character that we've gotten so far. And that's interesting to say at this point because I felt like I knew him pretty well right away. But I feel like this section really gives you a better idea of just what he's willing to do. And there is something about this story that feels like a combination in terms of scale, like a Greek myth, but also there's like a fairy tale kind of quality to it because Lyndon, let's all be honest. All right. Can we do that? We're friends here. If you were at a school where your ability was determined by some very specific and pretty rigid factors. They're not exactly flexible in this universe. And some dude comes in and manages to pull a fast one several times. There's no way that you wouldn't be resentful of that. At the same time, Lyndon is low-key acting like the trickster in any number of fairy tales where there's something that they're supposed to do and they manage to fool a person. The only thing that this author has chosen to do differently is have the number of people who are enchanted by his methods and think he is amusing much, much fewer than in the average story. Oftentimes when you have a character like this, they are rewarded for their cheekiness and their inventiveness and their resourcefulness with a compliment and well, that's not really what I meant, but you still got the job done, yada, yada, yada. And in this, the author goes to pains to really be like, no, he doesn't do the thing. He manages to eke out technical wins and finds ways for people to not be able to prove anything against him. That's how he does it. And you are on his side because you recognize that the culture and the hierarchy societally is not fair. This kid essentially was born with a disability and is being kept in his place due to something completely beyond his control that he was born with. So when you see it that way, it's the story of somebody finding a way to stick it to a community that does not care for people who are differently abled than they are. But when you try and step back and look at it as these people do, where they don't seem to respect or understand or be inclined to even question the idea that certain people are born with certain madras and others aren't. There's no investigation of what it means for somebody to be born unsouled. Nobody's asking that, which I find kind of curious. When he is tested and it's shown repeatedly that he is unsouled, there's not really there's no assessment of what that means when he asks his parents, other than the gods want to shame us. But as far as like theologically in their universe, what that means, or if magic can be called a theology, which I think in this case it can, there's no real implication for what it means about him as a person. You know, does this, all that we know is that people see someone who is unsouled as weak. And the thing is, physically, that is true. He cannot physically do the things that people who have full madras can do. That's not something he can do. But the foresight that he uses, because he doesn't have the abilities they have, he has to plan everything ahead much further. That is something they don't seem to value. They want people to purely think on their feet because they have the ability to do that. They have the tools they need to think on their feet and be able to reach into their toolbox and pull out whatever they need. And there is no value placed on the ingenuity, really, of a character who has to foresee exactly how shit's going to go down. Not only how it's going to go down, but the reaction of the person that he is fighting against. And this is going to be like the third time that we have seen this. He is a manipulator, but I mean that in the most respectful way. It sounds like an insult, but I swear. Where people, honestly, I don't want to be a victim blamer here as much as one can call somebody who goes up against Lyndon a victim, but they act really predictably. And honestly, to a point, it's their own fault for winding up in the situations they wind up in, because almost all of them would not have wound up where they are if it weren't for the fact that they continued to press their advantage and attempt to use their station to sort of like bolster their position in the argument that ensues after the actual fight happens. And that is really what makes them look bad in the end, is this like this insistence on like pursuing something to the end, and not and like, despite the fact that they know that they are so much more powerful than this kid, there is no sense of, well, you know what? You don't have the ability. It's not right for me to like do this. They have the sense of outrage. This impertinent kid who has no ability. How dare he speak to me this way? And their pride gets the better of them as he keeps knowing it will. And they fall right into his trap. And honestly, respect. Like, I can't be angry at a person who plays on other people's like profound flaws, especially when they're not. When I think about a person's flaws, usually what I think of are things that they wish they could change about themselves. But the flaw that these people are all displaying is a similar, I am better than these XYZ other people. And that is some shit that I cannot abide in a person. I just hate seeing it. You hate to see it. So when he is able to sort of school someone, of course there's a part of me that's like, this is delightful. And that's what you get, bitch. On the other hand, we see at the end of this section exactly how that can turn around and bite him. It's not like there's no consequences to doing what he does. This is a problem with a societal structure that supports people in positions that are seen as inherently superior. These people who fall into his traps because of pride, their assertion that they are better is borne out by the way everybody else treats them and has for their entire lives. And this is the kind of thing that I think people don't really understand about privilege. When you try and talk about privilege, people just immediately, if they don't get what you mean, shut down. And they don't see that privilege doesn't just mean that you got given something. A lot of times it does, but that's like a side effect of the privilege. It's not like the privilege is a direct result of you having been given something. These people who have, quote, normal madra are privileged. They, because of that, have to create another type of hierarchy within that because they, people just need to feel better than somebody else. And there are people within their society who are seen as stronger from the outset, who manage to ascend to the next level quickly at younger ages. And so they are continually seen by the rest of the clan as being more powerful and more worthy. They are given the elixirs and things that like somebody who is less strong really should be the one to get to assist them. And that is where it lays, is where somebody who has an advantage that they did not necessarily work for. You have to cycle your Madra. You have to train. You have to improve. And that is not without its own, I'm not trying to say that getting ahead and ascending to another level has nothing to do with your own work. Obviously, the whole point is that you can get ahead with your own work. That is what he is shown by Suriel. But if you are simply born with a better ability, you did not earn that. You were born this way and you got lucky. And everyone else happens to be of a mind to respect that thing that you were given. You, again, got lucky. What if this was a society that valued people who were unsouled because they're rare? And he would be in a completely different position solely because of the perception that that these people have of the value of Madra. And it's just another instance of it's all a construct. It's just purely a societal construct that everybody has agreed to. And because we've all agreed to it, we all fail to see that we invented it. And so we want to pretend that there's something inherently better about one thing than there is about another thing, when we just decided that. And him being unsouled, it comes with disadvantages. So it's easy to point to, he can't do X, Y, and Z. Of course, if he can't do that stuff that a lot of other people can do, they would think that he wasn't as worthy. But again, society is set up in such a manner that he isn't able to catch up, and he is left behind and treated poorly and insulted and seen as disposable. If he were placed into a society where he was seen as high value, where there was a lot of time and energy invested in getting him up to speed or formulating training that worked specifically within his ability, who knows what could happen? But we don't do that sort of thing. And I'm talking about we as human beings. We just have a very narrow view of what people are allowed. And it's astonishing how fixated we get on things that are invented purely. I mean, gender norms are the one that always comes to mind because it is something that has, so recently I have started to see more and more how ludicrous they are. But I really feel for Lyndon more and more as this goes on, because he has to resort to these tactics that they see as dishonorable. And it's very easy as a reader to fall into that and to believe that, dude, that's not really that's not cool. And I have to remind myself that he has been placed at a disadvantage on purpose. They specifically have not given him any of the tools that he needs to advance because they don't think he is worth it. So what he's doing to get what he needs is absolutely warranted. Just because they think it's dishonorable. This is a kid that's trying to survive. And might I add, he's not even just trying to survive at this point. He is trying to save all of their asses. They don't even know that he's over here trying to become gold level so that he can save their world, essentially. Lyndon, why? Like, there really comes a point where I'm like, maybe it's not worth it, buddy. Cut your losses. Get the fuck out of there. I don't know, you know? So anyway, that is my overall impression of this section. And I just wanted to talk about it because I kept finding myself like falling into that mindset of just being like, dude, that's fucked up. And then being like, oh my God, why am I not on his side more firmly? I am getting just as caught up in what is honorable. I'm caught up in like a lot of the fine print, to be honest. You know, there's moments where, for example, when he struggles to get to the top of the mountain and he is supposed to pass through such and such, and he fakes it to make it look like he passed through it, but he didn't. And there's a big part of me, especially like lawyerly part of me, and I'm like, he didn't actually go through it though. He went through a portion of it, but like he didn't adhere to the letter of what they asked him to do. If he had faked something or tricked somebody and managed to still fulfill the wording of the contract, that would be one thing. But essentially, I mean, he's just lying. And again, I have to start to just be like a little bit less puritanical about that and understand that lying, when you live in a society that has completely ostracized you and blocked you out, might not be the worst thing in the world. So anyway, backing up to chapter 12, we get a description of exactly how Sacred Valley is set up and what are called the 4 holy peaks. This is a really interesting opening paragraph. It's a paradise nestled within a mountain range, Sacred Valley. It is protected by weather and terrain, by the inhospitable nature of the surrounding regions, by ancient legend, and by a few significant individuals with vested interest in keeping the valley unexplored. Oh, really? Color me curious. I would love to know who those people are and what that's about. I can't, part of me immediately went to, okay, it's got to be like one of these godlike creatures. And then I was like, maybe that's not it at all. Maybe it's a human person who's just got some Madra ability. And I don't know how, as far as I know, it's Jade level is like the highest that we've got, right? Because after Jade, I believe immediately after Jade is Gold. I could be wrong. There might be like another Silver. I don't know. So it could just be somebody who's very like high level who is able to keep them separated from the rest of the world. But my initial assumption was, oh, it's somebody who lives in his universe. And then I was like, it might not be somebody from Sacred Valley. It might be somebody from another part of the world that wants to keep them separate. And why would that be? There's a lot of questions that come up with that very simple sentence, and I'm hoping to learn more about that. And that seems to be an ongoing theme as well in this series of chapters, is this like mention of the outside and this sort of like scare tactic of describing it as being essentially almost like I don't want to say wasteland, because that implies that there's no life. It's seen as like this really incredibly savage place that's practically unlivable except by some, hardy human beings who have learned to rough it and don't know any better. That's really like the implication, is that if they knew how we lived here, they would never want to stay where they are. But because they don't know any better, they continue living this like, dangerous life out amongst the animals because they are not as enlightened as we are. I mean, it's very clear. Suriel showed him other areas and other kingdoms, and there's plenty of civilization going on out there. So why are we either lying about it or so mistaken about it? That's really the main thing. Is there's a gentleman later on who shows Lyndon his like torn up arm and says that he sustained these injuries when he went out beyond the mountains. And it seems to me that when he tells Lyndon about what it's like out there, that he believes it. I didn't get the impression, and I could be wrong, but I didn't get the impression that he was lying. I got the impression that he was mistaken. And if he is mistaken, and he is one of the few that's actually gone out there, that's a hell of a secret. Like, that doesn't look like the lid's blowing off that one anytime soon. Whomever has set things up so that the people of Sacred Valley are afraid of the outside has seemed to do a very thorough job. And it has taken nothing less than like divine providence to show Lyndon that there's more. Who has the desire and who has the ability? And the desire, what's the motivation for it? Why do you want these people kept separate? Is there some sort of like, I don't feel like we've heard about a god in particular that is worshipped. Elder Whisper isn't really a god, is he? Elder Whisper is like a person who looks like a fox. I'm not even sure what Elder Whisper is. Like, he's a human in terms of his like mind. You know what? I don't have an answer to that. Anyway, I'm going into the weeds again. See, there's just a lot to consider with the way this story is set up. So the four mountains. Let's talk about the way these work. To the north, Yoma Mountain for the Fallen Leaf School. They are very focused on like the fruits of these purple orris trees that are sold and made into elixirs. And they also, it says they possess the largest and most obvious entrance into the labyrinth that forms the foundation of the entire Sacred Valley. Every 10 years it opens, and they're able to retrieve some treasures from the shallowest levels of the labyrinth within. The elders are. It's a labyrinth that goes underneath all of Sacred Valley, and they only open the door to it once every 10 years and only harvest things from the most shallow areas? What's up with that? What's going on there? Nobody's, it's like, I don't know. There's no mention of this labyrinth in other spots that I've seen. I might have missed it, but I kind of had my ears pricked up by that and I didn't notice anything. Nobody else has tried to get in there, or if they have, like, are they guarded? Is there supposed to be some sort of, like only the elders are able to go in when they open the doors every 10 years? Is there some source of power or danger that they're trying to keep everyone away from? How come that's not more of a thing? To the west, Mount Venture shows off its distinct mineral composition with rust-red cliffs. It is the shortest of the four peaks, and most of the mining in Sacred Valley takes place here. This is the home of the Kazan clan and the territory of the Golden Sword School, and the profits of the mine are split between them, which supports my hypothesis that the Kazan are kind of dwarves. Not in race, but, like the way that they seem to be represented in terms of character. To the south, the mountain called Great Father is broken, its peak shattered into a shape resembling the mouth of a bottle. Water pools up there, cascading down the cliffs in a stream known as the Dragon River. Fueled by the water aura at the top of the mountain, storms rack these slopes year-round, and the Holy Wind School maintains shelters for unlucky travelers caught outside. Favored Holy Wind's elders can bathe in the pool known as Grandfather's Tears, regenerating their vitality of body and spirit. To the east, Mount Samara rises as the tallest of the 4 holy peaks. It is blanketed in snow and crowned in a ring of pale white light that circles the summit. The halo appears at sundown and disappears at sunrise so that no one in Sacred Valley has ever experienced a dark night. I have to admit that does not sound appealing to me. I like the dark. Like, it can be a little freaky, I won't lie, but you need it, right? Like, and I liked the detail that the halo is something that was created by somebody. It's not a natural occurrence that's happening due to some, like, you know, quirk of the mountain or spirit or whatever. Somebody made it, and it just was so well done that it remains. So this is the little brief that we get about these different areas. And then Lyndon turns and reminder, everything got put back to the way that it was right before he fights the grandson of the High Patriarch. And he makes a deal with the Heaven's Glory School that if he beats the grandson, he gets his spot at the school. And it's pretty, like, when he turns to, like, you know, speak to the schools, we may have been told that Cyrus was up for a spot at the what is it? The Heaven's Glory School. But I didn't remember that. So I wasn't sure exactly what he was doing. And even if I was, I would not have, even if I knew this guy had a spot, I wouldn't have thought that what his next move is going to be was, I'm going to take your spot. And honestly, I got to just admire the audacity, because that is a real bold move. I mean, he's straight up coming in here and being like, I'll do this thing and I will embarrass you and take this opportunity away from you for, like, who knows how long, BT dubs, because spoilers, of course, Lyndon gets a spot, but they say something to the High Patriarch about how, well, we only really had space for one more, so now that he's taken the spot, we're going to head back up to our mountain, and y'all have fun, and we will be back to pick another disciple, you know, whenever we have room, if that's in another decade, who knows. Once we get to the school, there's been a bit of a slaughter, so they might have space for some new disciples sooner than that, but it's still, you know, quite a move. This is cutthroat shit. Imagine, like, you have, like, a fucking scholarship somewhere to a school that you've been, like, dreaming of attending, and somebody just manages to, like, cut in front of you and take your spot from you. That hurts, you know? Yikes. So the way that the kid says, Aemon, ensure he has no time to admit defeat. He's like, oh, not only am I going to beat you, but I'm going to kill you. I will do that because you have fucked with the wrong one today. And I'm going to make sure that you don't have a chance to concede out your mouth. Because I need to make sure your life is over, because I am not dealing with you anymore. So Lyndon runs away when the fight begins. It's really, the way it's written is quite funny. He reaches the edge of the stage and then turns to face his cousin. And it turns out that what he's doing is he's summoning forth the wasps from under the spot on the stage, and he has to make sure that Aemon is moving so quickly that he can't stop before he's in the midst of the cloud of wasps. And they go to fucking town on this kid. And pretty much all Lyndon has to do is while this guy is fighting back against all of these remnants, step forward, take the kid's staff away from him, and then smack the hell out of him with it. He isn't trained, by the way. Reminder, Lyndon isn't like some amazing fighter who can't use Madra, but he's still great at boxing or has some kind of martial art. Lyndon doesn't have training because he was not seen as worth training. So he takes the staff and does what you or I would likely do with it, which is just whack the fuck out of him with no expertise and no form at all. So finally, Aemon starts yelling, I give, but he can't even like get the whole word out. And the last thing that Lyndon does is puts the butt of it against Aemon's chest and just shoves him so that he falls off the stage. And then he turns to them and says, he's admitted defeat and left the bounds of the competition. And everybody is like, oh my God, are you serious? He fucking had what? That's not how this is. What are you? No. Meanwhile, there's this boy from Heaven's Glory School who it turns out is not a boy. His name is Elder Whitehall. He is afraid of death and aging, and he is trying to keep himself from aging. Kind of succeeded, except not in the way that's actually materially helpful. He looks like a boy still, but he doesn't have the vitality or the interior of a boy. His exterior looks like a boy's body, but his organs are all aging at a normal rate. So he's still dying of old age, even though he's in this little kid's body. And there's a mention later that the whole Heaven's Glory School believes that sending him out to be their sort of like interface with the world gives them an added mystique because he looks so young, that it sort of gives the impression that like the school is able to train children to be Jade level, which is like practically impossible. And I like that this is, you know, it's something that he tried to do for himself, but the school will definitely find a way to capitalize on it and turn it to their advantage, you know? So at this point, Cyrus, the patriarch, drops this like column of darkness around Lyndon. And I like the detail that Lyndon realizes that morning that this would have terrified him and made him completely cave on what he's trying to do. But after what he has just seen with Suriel, it's just not really that impressive to him anymore. So he's just kind of in this like tube of dark waiting for them to do what they're going to do, and is very calm about it. And Cyrus says that they'll punish him, but the elder from the school is like, we gave our word. So this is bullshit. Don't get me wrong. We all know that, but we said what we said and we have to stick to it. So we'll see it through. And, you know, I think when he says, have your grandson meditate on his failures, and perhaps when we again have space for a new disciple, we will consider him once more. I think maybe there's an implication there. Once we have space for a new disciple, will not be that far off, because they don't expect Lyndon to last very long. I mean, Whitehall doesn't seem to expect Lyndon to make it to the top of the mountain at all. And based on the way it's described, Lyndon is also pretty certain that he would not have made it. But we'll get there. So I really like this weird old man in a kid's body is very unnerving. And I kept wondering, like, you know, as we get to know Whitehall a little better, I wondered, and this will happen with me sometimes when you meet a new character in a story and they come across as like kind of frustrating or even mean, unreasonable, perhaps is the best word. Sometimes I'll wonder, am I going to love this person later? Because that can happen. Somebody will be introduced into a story and be really annoying. But as things continue, they become more of a player, and the things that frustrate you about them also become the things that are sort of endearing, and they turn into somebody that you grow to like in your own way. And there was a part of me that wondered that about Whitehall, and I do not think that's going to happen based on what we wind up seeing later. Like, because that was my question when we first meet him here. And once we're inside his head for any length of time, Whitehall seems like a real selfish piece of shit. I think that's an interesting recurring theme in these chapters, and perhaps in the entire book, is that there's such a focus on cycling Madra and ascension to the next level of ability, but there is not much of an emphasis on character. Everything is about physical ability and in a very material, provable, measurable way. But as far as like what kind of a person you are, we don't see that being a factor to people very much. And there's a lot of selfishness and a sort of like panic urge to get ahead of everybody else due to the fact that the society seems pretty cutthroat about who they just, you know, as Lyndon says when he winds up getting technical victories, they can't deny success, even if it's not the kind of success that they wanted to see. If you beat somebody else, they will reward that, even if you did it in a really shady way. And that's proven over and over again, and will be proven too, because it's all worked in Lyndon's favor to a point, at like from where we've been reading from. But we're coming to a place that's, there's going to be no, I feel like Lyndon keeps having to like really play it. And there are going to be people for whom the getting like a victory despite everybody knowing how you got it and the fact that it was not cool or legit, that's going to work against him at some point. He has been reliant on people being afraid of the, like, I mean, the honor of the kid that ran away from the remnant in the woods in the very first set of chapters. That was the kid's prerogative to tell the truth and be honest about what happened. And he didn't have to do that. And maybe after everything that went down, he wouldn't do it again. He might have learned his lesson, and the lesson is lie. So anyway, so Kelsa, for her part, you know, she has managed to go up against like practically, like, she winds up as the highest ranking young iron in the Way clan and gets several elixirs. And she's talking about it all with Lyndon and being like, you know, this is really awesome. These elixirs are super expensive and really powerful. But you're going to a school where they're going to be doing this stuff like all the time. And she doesn't even say she's jealous. She just kind of jokes around about how she should be asking them from him. And she notices that Lyndon is not as excited about this as he should be. He just managed to get a spot in a school that was unthinkable for him to be able to attend. He managed to beat this kid. So he added like a second bet to the first bet, and she winds up like knowing about that. She says, "You've won everything you've ever wanted. There are people who would kill you for a spot at a school, as a school disciple, and you're not proud of it. You haven't gloated. You haven't tried to get something extra out of the clan before you leave. You haven't even redeemed that deal of yours with the first elder. And he told me he'd expected to see you before sunset on the day of the foundation tournament. When you didn't show up, he thought you were dead." And Lyndon doesn't really have a good answer for her. He says something about, you know, how he humiliated the Way clan. But she's like, no, that's like an answer that would be legit coming from somebody else, but you don't think that way. You don't feel that way. What's happening with you? And he can't really tell her, you know, he's just like, she's just very bewildered and wants to get in on his confidence. And he can't, what is he going to say? Nobody remembers because he drops like hints and veiled questions and stuff about a gold descending from the sky, and nobody knows what the fuck he's saying. So it's clear that their memories just have none of that in there. There's nothing to be said, you know? So she says that they'll try and force you out as soon as they can, but what does it matter? You'll take what you can from them, and then if it gets too dangerous, you just come back down. Maybe you'll get an elixir or some treasures. This could be exactly what you need to make the clan proud. And when he says goodbye in the morning to his family to head up the mountain, they all just are kind of like, what's your deal? Because he's, you know, behaving like he's never going to see them again, which he does not think he will. And they all just think that he's off to do his little week stint trying to get ahead and that he'll be back soon. And so he's acting like, you know, crying and upset. And they're just like, what is your problem? So the first thing that, that we get from Heaven's Glory is Whitehall telling him, you made us wait, even though it's an hour before the sun comes up. Like, this kid is early AF, and they are still like, oh, God, thanks for finally showing up. And it's just like, you need to go sit the fuck down and have another latte because you are out of sorts. And then Whitehall tells him to be the one to drive the cart, which I feel like is an insult. It's not specific. Like, I think it's intended to be an insult because he says, hurry yourself. And then Lyndon, it says, without a word of dissent, Lyndon clambered up onto the driver's seat behind the oxen. So I think that's meant to be like, he could have protested if he had any sort of leg to stand on socially, but he just doesn't. So they get to the base of a mountain, and this is where Whitehall gets out and tells them to also get out, and they leave the carriage here. And he says that you have to walk a different path up the mountain. This is the first test of any disciple. And it's Lyndon and two other kids. One of them is about as tall as him, and the other one is short. And I believe it's the shorter one who dies on the way up, if I'm not mistaken. These two kids have iron badges. The fact that they are sharing space with Lyndon, who has a wooden badge, they cannot cope. They hate this. And Lyndon is trying to act like he doesn't notice, but he just, I mean, you know, nobody lets him forget. So they walk to like the base of the mountain, and just the walk to get to the bottom of the staircase is so fucking arduous that poor Lyndon is like dripping sweat and gasping for breath. And when they get there, there's this like wide set of white polished stairs. It says it was so wide that 100 men could march up side by side, which I love when shit's like overblown like this in stories, when it's like kind of mythically proportioned, you know. The path was obscured by clouds of light. Shapes moved within the light, shadows with twisted antlers and gaping jaws. Even the two iron disciples eyed the cloud with apprehension. Behold the trial of glorious ascension. Within that cloud are a few of the spirit aspect and mind aspect remnants our school has tamed over the generations. They will test your resolve, your determination, and the solid foundations of your spirit. With each step you climb, the trial will become heavier. Past a certain point, retreat is impossible. If you have no confidence, you may give up your title as a Heaven's Glory disciple and return to your home. I will tell you that 1 in 3 disciples who challenge this trial either dies or has their spirit broken, unable to practice the sacred arts again. The boy stared directly at Lyndon. I expect that statistic is especially appropriate today. Would any of you like to withdraw? And, of course, Lyndon is just like, What? I'm sorry. Did you? No, I don't. What do you mean? Like, I fucking love how this is always described. Lyndon maintained an open and honest expression as though he didn't realize what they expected of him. And that's my favorite. Do you know what I realized as I was reading this section specifically? Those of you who've read A Song of Ice and Fire, there is a lot of hate thrown at Sansa. Sansa in the books and Sansa on the show. Although Sansa on the show is hated much more, and that's the writer's fault. Don't get me started. Anyway, I am somebody who has come around on understanding that Sansa is playing a really specific game in a very different playing field than Arya. People love Arya because she is a fighter, because she is aggressive, because she is direct. But the thing is, what works for Arya out in the world facing up against foes is not the same shit that's gonna work when you're locked in the fucking Red Keep with a lunatic queen and her lunatic sadist son. So you have to figure out how to stay alive, and being aggressive and direct is a really good way to be thrown in a dungeon and forgotten forever. And in that respect, Sansa tends to really be a good symbol for women in history. There have been women who have managed to be aggressive and direct in history. Don't get me wrong. They exist, and they are, they are often historically notable for the fact that they managed to get away with it. It's not even if they were successful often. It's that they did it at all and managed to stay alive while doing it for any length of time. Otherwise, many, many women in history have had to function within a society that does not trust them, does not like them, does not want to give them anything, expects them to play a certain role and be happy with that. And they have to do this kind of thing where they kind of fake ignorance, even though they know perfectly well what the fuck somebody is saying to them. They know perfectly well the implication of whatever that asshole just said or did. But they have to be polite. They have to be nice, at least on the surface. They have to respect the hierarchy to a degree, or else they're not going to get where they need to go. And I think that's something that really the fact that Arya is so much more beloved in the stories, it could be the way she's written, for sure. But I think there's something very Western about a character who just flouts authority and does what they need to do regardless of what anyone says, and is extremely brazen and open about the fact that they are not going to follow rules. And we respond to that. And Lyndon is such an interesting, different kind of character where he's like, oh, I'm going to flout everything. Don't get me wrong. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. I'm just going to make them think either that I did what I was supposed to, or I'm going to make it look so close to that I did what I was supposed to that there's not much they can do about it. And that's kind of a Sansa thing. And that's a kind of a women, and honestly, a minority in general's approach to life. If you are from a marginalized group without certain privileges, you have to be careful. And you have to, a lot of times, behave as if you aren't as smart as you are to keep other people from feeling threatened. And you have to maintain your composure to a degree that's practically superhuman in situations where you should not be expected to be calm or collected at all. And I don't know. I really like this. So the two kids go up these stairs, and Lyndon, meanwhile, is like, no, I'm going to go the other way. And he turns around, and what he does is rolls himself in dirt, gets a couple of wounds on himself so that he's got a little bit of blood, And he really makes it look good. And then he waits down by where the carriage is, which he was like, please let the carriage still be there. Please let the carriage still be there. And it is, because somebody has to come get the carriage. And then what they do is they bring him to the top. The thing is, he makes sure to act like his pride is such an issue. He acts like he doesn't want to take the carriage ride at first and sort of like manipulates this kid into insisting. And then once they're near the top, he's like, I have to make the rest of the climb on my own. Please let me out here. And then manages to make it look, once he is out of the carriage, he climbs back to the spot with the staircase and manages to look like he actually went through the trial. And we hear from him that like the little portion of the trial that he did experience was really fucking rough. And he hears about some other things happening later, and he's just like, God, that sounds brutal. I don't think I would have made it through that whole thing. And I appreciate, I'll say this. What this author isn't doing is giving Lyndon this magic inherent ability that he didn't know was there until his life was threatened kind of thing. He doesn't try and push through this ordeal that has killed people and just make it because of the force of will he has, or because he's some sort of chosen one. I mean, I don't know. There might be a prophecy about him. We're not that far into these books, but I'm just saying that there is a way this stuff often tends to go, and it's not following that formula, and I appreciate it. He's finding ways around it rather than going through and, quote, proving everyone wrong about him. It's not about that. It's not about they are underestimating him, because that's still functioning with like assessing him on the scale they have established. What the author's doing is taking their little chart and their levels and all of that and just setting that aside and being like, that doesn't matter. He's going to figure it out. Whatever. It doesn't have anything to do with what they think. And appreciate it. So mentioning Whitehall, there is this little detail that we get about a sword sage who is a refiner, and he's somebody from the outside who came to the school in order to sell some things. And as a refiner, he was able to like use ingredients and herbs and make these like elixirs and things. And also because he goes outside of Sacred Valley, find ingredients that are really, really rare. And it says Whitehall had attempted to buy what he wanted from the sage, as had many of the other Heaven's Glory elders. The visitor had laughed and insulted them to their faces, saying they did not deserve such treasures. That was why the elders had collectively decided to kill him and take his wealth for their own. So they're just very fucking bloodthirsty up here. This was a nice insight, and I appreciated getting to see this, because it gave me more of an idea of what the fuck it is that Lyndon's walking into here. He is not prepared. And they tried to kill this dude and take his shit, but they were not counting on his remnant, who is apparently pretty fierce. And they wind up having to lock the guy's corpse and the remnant up in this other room. And once Whitehall comes back, he's like, at first he's pissed because he thinks that he missed out on the chance to like loot this guy. But then he realizes the remnant is still guarding this guy's property, and there's still a chance, if he's able to get in there and take down this remnant, that he can take all that shit for himself, and he doesn't even have to split it with anybody, which he would be perfectly fine doing because he's a real piece of shit, like I said. Whitehall is the one that's standing at the top when Lyndon gets to the top in under the time he took to get to the top when he went through this whole thing. And he is just absolutely livid. Like, it's just such a combination of, you're an Unsouled and I'm sure you're lying. And if you're not lying, that means that you are somehow better than me, which is totally not true either. Like, it's just so much pride wrapped up in all of this suspicion. He is about to just kill Lyndon, but it turns out there are two kids that are standing there who are also disciples, and Whitehall can't risk just killing the kid outright. And Lyndon had gotten to the top before sunset, which means that he gets this like token that lets him into a treasure hall, a lesser treasure hall, I might add, which means that he gets to see some like rad shit that we learn is low level compared to the other stuff he's going to encounter later on in his life. So Lyndon goes to this treasure hall, and there's this man. This guy, I don't know what it is about him, because he's described as very old and shriveled and wispy, but for some reason, the person I kept picturing in my head when I like read this character's what is it called? When I read his dialogue and the expressions on his face and the way that he like sort of joked around with Lyndon, all I could picture was King Boomy from Avatar: The Last Airbender. I don't know why, but I just kept getting like grizzled, kooky old man vibes off of him, like somebody who's very much like Team Lyndon in terms of manipulating and trickster and all of that stuff. Like he seems to see who and what Lyndon is pretty quick, and he has no problem with it. In fact, he seems to be amused by it, in the sense that I get the vibe he doesn't think a lot of the way everyone operates, and he likes there being a wrench thrown into things, because I think he sees that as being good for them. So Lyndon goes in there, and he is given, he can have exactly one of any of the treasures that he sees, and everything has a little card that describes what it is and what it does. And he sees some really cool shit. And every time he sees a new one, he's like, oh, this is the one I want. And I love this because it's like really similar to in a video game when you get like a weapon or something, and you can only carry one sword. You can only have one shield, but each time that you come across another one, you're like, oh, this is the one. So he first like, and part of the restriction too, Lyndon doesn't have the Madra aspects that are required to run certain items. So that cancels out a lot right away. There's a flying sword, spirit lamp. There's like a sentinel like eyeball stone thing that can follow him and like watch his back. A lot of stuff that he really could use. There's a what we had heard about before, the parasite ring, which will cycle his Madra more effectively, and so he will like be able to level up a little sooner, even though there's a lot that it seems like would be a good idea for him. And Ram, who's the old man who like, you know, keeps custody of all of this, leads him through and gives him some further ideas of, you know, things that could be useful to him. And one of them is, I can't even remember what it is, but he is able to, like, probably if he uses this, get to copper right away. And I really thought that was what he was going to choose. But instead he picks this, like, set of banners that you have to, like, place in a circle. They're basically like little, like, garden flags is my image of it. And they will create a, foxfire sort of trap that's like a illusion. And this is what he chooses, which I didn't really feel like too excited about, because the setting up of it, I was like, that's a pain in the ass. But then he like immediately uses it on this dude who is trying to start some shit with him. The Kazan disciple that, let's see, I'm trying to find it. I'm Kazan Maderet, and I have had my honor trampled by the trash behind you. And Elder Ram is like, what the fuck is your problem? And everybody's a little bit like, why are you defending this Unsouled? He's nothing. What are you doing? So we know now that Lyndon has a little bit of an ally here, and this is nice. So yeah, Lyndon manages to get this kid to chase him, walk right into the trap, and wins. But there's consequences. So as a new disciple, he gets this like set of a spirit fruit and 2 pills, basically. And these are both going to really level him up. Like, not necessarily into copper right away, but they will get him way along the way. He can't use them all at once, though. He can take 1 pill, then he has to like cycle his madra several days, then eat the spirit fruit, then cycle that, then take the next pill, then cycle. It's a probably 2-week process is the vibe I'm getting. And I'm so excited about this, and this all sounds like this is so fucking badass. And they're both like the clear blood, will purify the madra, and then the spirit fruit is like one of a very unusual type that's extremely beneficial. So you really get psyched up about like how rad this is going to be. And then he fucking leaves and somebody mugs him. And by somebody, I mean Darrett, because Darrett is a punk ass bitch. And Darrett essentially takes his stuff and beats the fuck out of him and spits on him and just leaves him in the street. And this is a real rude awakening for Lyndon, because he's always been treated badly, but this is the first time that he's ever like had to endure something like this. And the person who did it to him is going to have absolutely no retribution, more than likely. So he winds up in the infirmary, and this is where he overhears somebody describing this girl who managed to cut all 14 of them who were going up against her, or 15, just by pulling out her sword. It just cut them all, and like bone deep. And that is the end of the chapter, is him being like, where was this? So I had to rush through that back end a little bit, but I think that's okay. But yeah, I'm really into this, so I can't wait to find out what happens next. I have another episode tomorrow, so those of you who are interested, you can come to that. Same time, 6 p.m. And yeah, thank you again, Andrew, for commissioning this. I'm having a lot of fun reading this so far. I really am enjoying it. And I hope that you guys are enjoying listening. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.